I didn't sit down to write a good young adult book or a good adult book. I really tried to write someone's favourite book.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 20 books of the century so far.
And in a way, once I had written that one, I kind of realized I was hooked.
For this list, we're only looking at fiction novels released from 2000 onwards. So no nonfiction, short story collections, or poetry collections. Let us know in the comments what your favorite 21st century novel is. Number 20. Half of a Yellow Sun, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. All three of Adichie's novels are worthy of being on our list, with the other two being Purple Hibiscus and Americana. Half of a Yellow Sun is her second novel, published in 2006, set primarily during the tumultuous Nigerian civil war of the late 60s.
It's estimated that more than 1 million people died, most of them from hunger.
If you're remotely interested in Nigerian history or this unfortunately forgotten corner of the 20th century, then this novel is an excellent portrayal of the conflict, as well as being a key post-colonial book. It's about love, poetry, family, and war, and won numerous awards, including the Orange Prize for Fiction and Women's Prize for Fiction.
And I don't want to sound, really precious, but it really did feel as though my ancestors wanted me to do this, that this was what I had to do. And so I felt that when I finished the book, I would be free in some way.
Number 19. The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, Michael Chabon. This frenetic novel has an extraordinary depth of subject matter, tackling both the experience of Jewish diaspora during and after the Second World War and the dawn of the golden age of comic books and the earliest superheroes. Two young Jewish residents of New York, one who recently fled from Nazi-occupied Prague, invent a Houdini-esque superhero called the Escapist as the antidote to the world's rampant fascism.
It was a place I wished I could see with my own eyes, and the surest way to see those places that you wish you could see is, to write about them. That's why I wrote about New York in the 1940s.
It's about religious persecution, the immigrant experience, and pursuing your own creative goals and passions, winning Chabon the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2001. You definitely want to read it for its fictionalized version of the American dream and overview of comic book history. Number 18. Cloud Atlas, David Mitchell. This epic was adapted into a star-studded movie in 2012 by the Wachowskis and Tom Tykwer. And you know it's gotta be good if it attracts their attention.
I'm not afraid of such thoughts because I do not fear the truth. There's a natural order to this world, fabricant. And the truth is, this order must be protected.
A British novel, it was published in 2004 and claimed a few awards, even getting shortlisted for the UK's most prestigious literary award, the Booker Prize. It's about a group of characters from across the globe and throughout time, beginning with Adam Ewing in the 19th century and ending with a post-apocalyptic vision of Hawaii. The different stories interweave and transcend genre, with science fiction in Neo-Korea and a darkly comedic look at a sinister hotel that preys on debtors. Number 17. Clara and the Sun, Kazuo Ishiguro. Kazuo Ishiguro is one of Britain's most decorated authors, having won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2017, and he realized his 8th novel in 2021 to tackle the most modern moral threat, artificial intelligence. The point of view character is Clara, an android known in the narrative as an artificial friend who is the sole companion of a terminally ill teenage girl in the US. This was another sci-fi outing for Ishiguro, who's also written acclaimed novels on the British class system and clones falling in love, and he definitely hasn't lost any talent. It's heartwarming and tragic, an interrogation of what values make up a human being and whether our definition of human is too narrow.
Clara and the Sun isn't an attempt to write some big definitive thing about how our societies will change. Although that is in the backdrop, there's a background of a society in flux, not just because of artificial intelligence and its repercussions, but also because of gene editing.
Number 16. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Stieg Larsson. Originally slated to be the first novel in a long-running series of 10, it was unfortunately cut short after Larson's tragic death, and we only got 3 novels in the series penned by him.
The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest have been translated into 44 languages. The Dragon Tattoo is the best-selling ebook of all time.
The first is certainly the most famous, getting adapted into a movie starring Rooney Mara and Daniel Craig, directed by David Fincher in 2011.
I like working with you.
I like working with you too.
It's a dark thriller about the suspicious disappearance of a girl in the 1970s, identified only by the distinct tattoo of a dragon. It's ultimately an unflinching, harrowing look at violence against women, and it remains one of the most famous and popular Swedish novels ever written. Number 15. The Goldfinch, Donna Tartt. If you're familiar with The Goldfinch, you'll also be familiar with its contentious reputation and lackluster movie adaptation starring Ansel Elgort and Finn Wolfhard.
I can assure you that if there's been a mistake...
Oh, but there has been, Mr. Decker.
There's no denying that The Goldfinch is flawed, but certain parts shine so brightly it's easy to overlook its faults, and it remains a deeply important 21st century novel regardless. It's a Bildungsroman almost 800 pages long, following the life of Theo Decker after a bomb is shockingly detonated in New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art. The recipient of 2014's Pulitzer Prize and a wild bestseller, Tartt's novel examines American life, misguided youths, art thievery, and tragedy. You'll either love it or hate it.
I love that childhood quality of just that gleeful, greedy reading, can't get enough of it, what's happening to these people, the breathless kind of turning of the pages. That's what I want in a book.
Number 14. The Book Thief, Marcus Zuzak. The point of view character of the Book Thief is Death himself, and if that doesn't get you interested, we don't know what will. Through the Grim Reaper, we learn the story of Liesel, a girl beset by family tragedy who ends up growing up in 1930s Germany with a foster family. A foster family who agrees early on to harbor a Jew being pursued by the Nazis. It's dark, and at some points extremely upsetting, as you'd expect given the subject matter. But it's also one of the most beautiful novels ever written, and a true modern classic, reframing the horrors of the Second World War through the eyes of Death, who bears witness to them all.
I wanted to write a 100-page novella, and it just turned into a book. You know, I got a bit carried away, and it turned into a book that was a bit longer, and a book that now just means everything to me.
Number 13. All the Light We Cannot See, Anthony Doerr. Another World War II novel, this one tackles life in occupied France and was 2015's Pulitzer winner. It's about a blind Parisian girl, Marie-Laure Leblanc, and her father as they attempt to evade the Nazis by initially leaving Paris for more rural pastures. As well as the Leblancs, the other main character is the German boy Werner Pfennig, a technological wizard who is turned into another instrument of the Nazis.
He finds his own way out by fixing a radio for a very important official. He thinks it's going to be a way out of the mines, but it turns out to be a very complicated way out. He ends up at a paramilitary school for Hitler Youth.
Their stories ultimately and memorably converge in France, examining both the people the Third Reich heavily relied upon and the people in the French resistance working tirelessly to undermine the occupying forces.
I wanted to write about electromagnetic waves and all this invisible light that carries, messages between human beings. I just felt like we had forgotten what a magical thing that was.
Number 12. Life of Pi, Yann Martel. A Canadian novel, Martel's masterpiece was eligible for and won the Booker Prize, turning even more attention to this stunning novel that eventually became a widely successful movie directed by Ang Lee. On the surface, it's a tense and exhilarating novel about Pai Patel, a young boy stranded in a boat in the ocean with a deadly Bengal tiger, while his family attempts to emigrate across the Pacific. But upon further inspection, it's really a story about the nature of truth and what you choose to believe about the world, should you forego with accuracy entirely to spin a worthy yarn.
In both stories, the ship sinks
My family dies and I suffer.
True.
So which story do you prefer?
Number 11, Atonement, Ian McEwan. Getting on the Booker Prize's 2001 shortlist, Atonement has been acclaimed in the 2 decades since its release. It follows the life of Bryony Taras, beginning in the 1930s, going through World War II, and ending in present day, which here is 1999. So it's another historical artifact by now.
Stupendous.
It traverses the dominant genres of its 3 time periods, ending with a postmodernist twist that forces you to think about that age-old trope once again, the unreliable narrator. We won't spoil it, of course, but it's definitely a book more about the journey than the destination, and about what dwelling on one's regrets does to a person.
I couldn't any longer imagine what purpose would be served by it.
By what, sorry? So by honesty?
By honesty. Or reality.
Number 10, The Known World, Edward P. Jones. This hard-hitting novel takes us to Virginia in the 1840s and follows the life of Henry Townsend, a former slave who becomes a plantation and slave owner himself. It's an unflinching look at the darkest chapter in American history, told through an omniscient narrator and focusing on an area that isn't often talked about. Released in 2003, years later, it's still an extremely unique portrayal of antebellum society that has been widely acclaimed, with Jones taking home 2004's Pulitzer Prize for his work. While Jones denied doing much research, historians have praised it as accurately representing the culture of the period.
There are 1 or 2 facts that I gleaned before I started writing the book, but other than that, everything is out of my imagination. So I'm not sure how any history professor would ever use it.
Ultimately, it's a novel about what it means to be part of a nationwide system of oppression. Number 9, The Kite Runner, Khaled Hosseini. His first novel remains perhaps his most acclaimed, though the follow-up, 1,000 Splendid Suns, is just as good in a lot of ways. Like Hosseini's other books, The Kite Runner is about life in Afghanistan, specifically the capital of Kabul, before, during, and after the 1979 Soviet invasion and the American installation of the Taliban. On a more micro level, it's about 2 young boys, Amir and Hassan, from completely different walks of life who bond over a mutual love of flying kites, something the Taliban would later make illegal.
Hosseini's first novel, The Kite Runner, took on a life of its own. More than 100 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and a popular Hollywood film.
It's profound, dark, and remains just as relevant today as it was when it was published in 2003. Number 8, The Road, Cormac McCarthy. If there's one thing the modern age loves, it's a story about a bleak, unforgiving, post-apocalyptic landscape, and McCarthy's The Road is one of the greatest post-apocalypse narratives ever written. The US has been ravaged by a cataclysm. Exactly what the cataclysm is isn't important. What matters is the struggle of a lone father and his young son as they traverse the wasteland and encounter untold horrors. It's not a book for the faint of heart, as it gets so dark and gruesome even early on, but it's still a vitally important novel that has influenced pop culture in the years since its 2006 release.
We did good, didn't we, Papa?
Yeah. Number 7, Gilead, Marilyn Robinson. Reverend John Ames is writing a chaotic, disjointed memoir, and the finished product is Marilyn Robinson's critically acclaimed sophomore novel published in 2004. Its title is the town in which it's set, Gilead, Iowa, and chronicles Ames' own recollection of his life from his childhood in the 19th century to the looming end of his life in the 50s.
It seems to me transformations just that abrupt do occur in this life, and they occur unsought and unawaited, and they beggar your hopes and your deserving.
It's the first novel of Robinson's Gilead tetralogy, and as well as focusing on Ames's desire to leave something of himself for his younger son. It's also about America's long and complex relationship with religion and small-town life.
Are you done with these characters? I don't know.
The question is more, are they done with me?
Are they done with you?
I don't know. I have a couple of obligations that I have to satisfy first, and then I will see where my mind is.
Yeah.
Number 6, Gone Girl, Gillian Flynn. Another novel adapted into a hit movie directed by David Fincher, Gone Girl, starring Rosamund Pike and Ben Affleck, is undeniably a cinematic classic and one of the century's greatest movies. And it's also one of the century's greatest novels, written by Gillian Flynn in 2012. It's about a woman, Amy Dunn, who disappears under mysterious circumstances and the investigation into her vanishing and whether her husband Nick is responsible.
I love you no matter what. But you need to tell me.
Tell you what? What are you asking me? Are you asking me if I killed my wife?
Through this premise, Flynn looks at male violence against women and, through that masterful plot twist, reframes the novel as one about female agency. It's a masterful thriller that certainly deserved its place on the bestseller lists.
It has been a remarkable journey for Flynn. Laid off as a writer for Entertainment Weekly back in 2008. A few years later, Gone Girl, on the cover of that same magazine.
Number 5, White Teeth, Zadie Smith. The pinnacle of the post-colonial era, Zadie Smith's electric debut explored in detail the UK's large and diverse immigrant population, with characters coming from South Asia, the Caribbean, and England itself. These characters span generations and all converge at the end in a climax about religious extremism, post-war Nazi scientists, and genetic modification.
Salman Rushdie has said Zadie Smith's fizzling first novel is about how we all got here and about what here turned out to be.
With White Teeth, Smith immediately established herself as one of the UK's greatest living writers, and she's consistently proven herself to be immensely talented through her subsequent novels and essay collections. But there's something about White Teeth that means it's still a cut above the rest, even decades on. Number 4, The Underground Railroad, Colson Whitehead. Long a successful American author, Colson Whitehead became one of the nation's most decorated novelists upon the release of The Underground Railroad in 2016. It's about a young slave named Cora who escapes from her plantation and her treacherous journey out of the Deep South while being pursued by a notorious slave catcher. But Whitehead's genius was in reimagining pre-Civil War America's Underground Railroad as a literal underground railroad, a complex network of trains run by abolitionists who wants to help escaped slaves reach the U.S.'s safer northern states. He won a myriad of awards, including the coveted Pulitzer, and the novel became an Amazon Prime miniseries in 2021.
Who built all this?
Who builds anything in this country?
Number 3, Middlesex, Jeffrey Eugenides. Almost a decade after the success of The Virgin Suicides, Eugenides came back with Middlesex, a long epic about Greek diaspora and modern gender issues in equal measure. The main character is Cal, whose family are Greek immigrants who have relocated to Detroit. Cal tells the story as an adult who already knows about and understands that they are intersex, something their parents also didn't know, raising them as a girl.
He has a genetic mutation that caused him to be born female and then virilize and turn into a boy at puberty.
In a lot of ways, Middlesex is an even more relevant and important novel today. It's a thoughtful and empathetic look at intersex people and how liberating breaking free from gender norms can be. Number 2, A Visit from the Goon Squad, Jennifer Egan. Whether A Visit from the Goon Squad is a standalone novel or a short story collection remains hotly debated, but Egan herself categorizes it as a novel, so we're going with that. It's a series of connected stories focusing on characters who all loosely know another as their lives overlap, and many of the stories and characters are associated with music. Released in 2010, it's been heralded as stylistically fresh and unique, transcending genre, era, character, and even medium at certain points.
And to me, the novel, while many people feel that it's imperiled by all this, I don't actually feel that way, because to me, the novel has always been a very flexible, elastic, open form.
It's an unforgettable modern love letter to New York that you won't be able to put down.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Number 1. The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde, Junot Diaz. There are plenty of novels about the American immigrant experience, and The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde stands tall with many of the genre's other greats. It's not told from Oscar's perspective, but it follows his life in New Jersey as a Dominican immigrant trying to balance his passion for sci-fi magazines and comic books with his unquenchable desire to fall in love. But it's also a generation-spanning family saga about Oscar's family, their lives in the Dominican Republic before moving to America, and Oscar's desire to find more of a purpose by returning to his familial homeland.
That what happens when you're a kid like me who, goes to Rutgers and basically runs around and chases chicks, and you visit a home where your parents were like victims of a dictatorship. Like, do those histories ever meet? And do they actually ever influence each other?
You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you'll never be the same again. Undoubtedly, it's the century's best novel yet.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.